What if I told you that the most generous person you know could become the most ruthless when they discover their kindness has been betrayed? This is the story of Dorothy Grace Washington, a 64-year-old African-American woman who dedicated every heartbeat to her 3 children, only to discover that to them, she was less important than a business dinner when she needed them most. It was a November night in Atlanta when Dorothy felt the world collapse on her chest like a mountain of concrete. The air had become thick, unbreathable, and every heartbeat echoed like war drums in her ears. Her trembling hands dialed the number of Marcus, her eldest son of 45, while a fierce stab pierced her chest like a burning dagger. "Mom, I'm in a very important meeting with Japanese investors," was the first thing she heard when Marcus finally answered after 5 calls. "I can't talk right now. I'll call you tomorrow." Dorothy tried to explain that she couldn't breathe, that it felt like someone was crushing her heart with an iron fist, but the line was already dead. Her son had hung up without hearing a single complete word of her agony. With fingers numb from pain that spread like liquid fire through her left arm, she dialed the number of Anthony, her second son of 42. The phone rang endlessly, until a hoarse voice answered amid laughter and background music. "Mom, what's up? I'm at a super important client's wedding. I can't hear you well. Can you call me tomorrow?" He too hung up before Dorothy could articulate that she was dying, literally dying, while he was toasting with champagne at someone else's celebration. Desperate, with vision blurred by tears of physical and emotional pain, Dorothy called Jasmine, her only daughter of 38, the apple of her eye, the one she had carried in her arms during entire nights when she had fever. "Mom, I'm at my husband's theater premiere," Jasmine responded with that affected voice she used when she wanted to sound important. "There are many critics here, journalists, people from the artistic community. I can't leave now. It would be very rude. I'll see you this weekend, okay?" Dorothy collapsed on the cold floor of her small apartment in southwest Atlanta, that modest place she had moved to after selling her house to help Marcus with the down payment for his residence in Buckhead. The pain in her chest had intensified until it became a savage beast devouring every fiber of her being. With what little strength she had left, she dialed 911, and while waiting for the ambulance, a single question hammered in her mind like drops of acid rain. When exactly had she stopped mattering to the people she loved most in the world? The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later, 20 eternal minutes, during which Dorothy experienced 3 cardiac arrests that technically took her to death for a total of 6 minutes. The paramedics fought against time and death itself to bring her back, applying electric shocks to her heart while racing through the paved streets toward Grady Hospital. Dorothy floated between consciousness and darkness, hearing distant voices talking about blood pressure, dangerous arrhythmias, the urgent need to operate immediately. In the emergency room, while doctors prepared everything for open-heart surgery that would determine if Dorothy would see another dawn, Dr. Rodriguez, a 50-year-old man with premature gray hair and eyes tired from seeing so much suffering, picked up the phone to contact the family. He had reviewed Dorothy's medical record and knew she was a woman alone, widowed for 15 years, whose only registered family were 3 adult children. "Mr. Marcus Washington," he told the eldest son when he finally managed to contact him after several calls. "This is Dr. Rodriguez from Grady Hospital. Your mother, Dorothy Grace Washington, has just suffered a massive myocardial infarction. She has had multiple cardiac arrests, and we need to operate on her immediately. The situation is critical, very critical. I need you to come immediately, because there's a high probability she won't survive the night." The silence on the other end of the line stretched like an eternity, until Marcus finally responded with a voice that distilled more annoyance than concern. "Doctor, I understand the situation, but I'm closing a multi-million-dollar deal with some investors who flew from Tokyo specifically for this meeting. My mother has always been very strong. She's gotten through everything. Can't it wait until tomorrow morning? I can be there at 8 in the morning." Dr. Rodriguez felt that his 25 years of medical experience hadn't prepared him to hear a son say that a business deal was more important than his mother's final moments of life. "Mr. Washington, I think you're not understanding me. Your mother could die tonight. She has been clinically dead for 6 minutes. Every second counts." "Look, doctor," Marcus interrupted with a tone that revealed a coldness that chilled the blood. "My mother has given us many scares over the years. She always exaggerates her ailments, Besides, canceling this meeting would cost me my job and my family's future. I'm sure my mother would understand. She always taught us that work is sacred. The doctor hung up the phone with a mixture of disbelief and disgust that churned his stomach. In his 25 years of career, he had seen many things, but he had never heard a son refer to his mother's agony as an exaggeration. He immediately dialed Anthony's number, hoping to find at least a trace of humanity in the second son. Mr. Anthony Washington, your mother, Dorothy, is in critical condition after a severe heart attack. She has had multiple cardiac arrests, and we need you to come immediately. This is a life-or-death situation. The doctor spoke with the precision and urgency of someone who had given this news thousands of times, but had never expected the response he received. Doctor, I really appreciate the call, but I'm at the wedding of the director of the most important company in my sector. Canceling my attendance would be professional suicide. My mother always told us we had to think about our future. Besides, these weddings cost a fortune. I can't leave in the middle like I'm being rude. Do you think my presence at the hospital is going to change anything? Doctors are the ones who know. I don't have medical knowledge. Your presence? Sir, we're talking about your mother possibly dying tonight. Don't you understand the gravity of the situation? Dr. Rodriguez felt his professionalism wavering in the face of such human insensitivity. Doctor, my mother is 64 years old and has been through many difficult things. She's a very resilient woman. I'm sure she's going to pull through like always. Look, I promise that tomorrow morning after the wedding breakfast, I'll stop by the hospital. How about if I arrive around 10 in the morning? The physician hung up without saying goodbye, feeling a nausea that had nothing to do with the fatigue of his 24-hour shift. With little hope, he dialed Jasmine's number, praying internally to find at least a drop of filial love in this family that seemed made of ice. Ms. Jasmine Washington, this is Dr. Rodriguez from Grady Hospital. Your mother, Dorothy, has suffered a massive heart attack and is in critical condition. We've had to resuscitate her several times. I need you to come immediately because her life is in real and imminent danger. Oh, doctor, what terrible news! Jasmine responded with a voice that sounded more concerned about the interruption than the news itself. But look, I'm at my husband's premiere. He's worked 2 years on this project, and all the specialized critics are here. If I leave now, it's going to look like I don't support his artistic career. My marriage is very important to me, doctor. Do you think my mom would agree that I should ruin my husband's career to go sit in a waiting room without being able to do anything? Miss, your mother could die in the next few hours. Do you understand what that means? The doctor no longer tried to hide his exasperation. Doctor, my mother always taught us to be responsible with our commitments. She herself would scold me if she knew I abandoned something so important. Besides, hospitals are full of qualified staff. Why would I be getting in the way? Let me talk to her tomorrow when she's calmer and more recovered. Dr. Rodriguez hung up the phone and stared at the wall for several minutes, processing what he had just heard. In almost 3 decades of medicine, he had seen families devastated by the possible loss of a loved one. He had consoled children who traveled from abroad to be with their sick parents. He had witnessed the purest love expressed in moments of crisis. But never had he heard 3 adult children systematically refuse to be with their dying mother because they had social commitments. He headed to the operating room where Dorothy was being prepared for the most important surgery of her life, an operation that would determine if she would see another day or if she would be reunited forever with her deceased husband, James, who had died 15 years earlier in a workplace accident, leaving her alone to raise 3 teenagers on a housekeeper's salary. Dorothy, the doctor whispered as she was sedated, although she probably couldn't hear him. Your children are coming. Don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. It was a white lie, the first of many he would have to tell that night. The operation lasted 4 interminable hours. 4 hours during which Dorothy's heart was literally repaired stitch by stitch, artery by artery, while 20 miles away, Marcus was closing his $1 million deal toasting with sake. Anthony was dancing waltz at a luxury reception, and Jasmine was applauding her husband's performance at a theater in Midtown Atlanta. When Dorothy woke up in the intensive care unit, with tubes coming out of her body like roots of a sick tree and machines monitoring every beat of her repaired heart, the first thing she asked with a hoarse voice was about her children. The nurse on duty, a young woman named Patricia with kind but sad eyes, didn't know what to answer. Did my children come? Are they here? Dorothy tried to sit up, but the cables and tubes prevented her. I need to see them. I need to tell them I'm okay. Patricia checked her chart and then looked at Dorothy with an expression that mixed professional compassion with personal indignation. Mrs. Dorothy, the doctor spoke with your 3 children. He explained the severity of your situation. They said they would come tomorrow. Tomorrow? They're not here? Dorothy felt something break inside her chest, and this time it wasn't her physical heart. It was something much deeper, something that until that moment had held together her entire existence, the blind faith that her children loved her. In that moment, while looking at the hospital ceiling at 3 a.m, connected to machines that kept functioning the heart that had just been repaired, Dorothy Grace Washington made a decision that would change not only her life, but her 3 children's forever. A decision that would prove that a mother's unconditional love has limits, and that when those limits are crossed, the consequences can be more devastating than any heart attack. But that decision would have to wait until Dorothy had enough strength to execute the most audacious and painful plan of her life, a plan that would show Marcus, Anthony, and Jasmine the true price of having chosen their social commitments over the final beats of their mother's heart. This is the first part of a story that will make you reflect on the value of family and the consequences of our decisions. If so far you've been moved by Dorothy's situation, imagine what's to come. Give this video a like if you want to know how this incredible story continues, and don't forget to subscribe because we have many more stories that will touch your soul. The following days in the hospital were a painful revelation for Dorothy. Every hour that passed without a call from her children was like a drop of poison accumulating in her soul, transforming decades of unconditional love into something darker and more powerful, the absolute understanding of her own loneliness. Thursday morning, when more than 24 hours had passed since her surgery, the phone in her room finally rang. Dorothy sat up with difficulty, ignoring the stabbing pain in her chest, her heart racing with the hope of hearing the worried voice of one of her children. It was Marcus. "Mom, how are you? Sorry I didn't call earlier, but the deal with the Japanese got complicated, and we had to stay very late closing all the details." His voice sounded tired, but there wasn't a trace of genuine concern. "Did they discharge you yet? Because I need to ask you a really important favor." Dorothy felt something icy settle in her stomach. Her eldest son hadn't asked about her operation, hadn't shown relief knowing she was alive, hadn't mentioned the fact that she had been clinically dead. His first question had been about discharge, and his first intention, to ask her a favor. "Marcus, yesterday they operated on my heart. I was dead for 6 minutes," Dorothy responded with a voice she didn't recognize as her own, a voice that distilled a strange and disturbing calm. "The doctor said it was a miracle I survived." "Oh yeah, sure. Good thing you're better now." "Mom, look, I need you to do me an urgent favor. Do you remember those papers from the house you sold to help me? Turns out I need them for a bank procedure, and they're in your apartment. Could you ask someone to go get them? It's just that if I don't turn them in today, I lose a refinancing opportunity that would save me like $50,000 a year." Dorothy closed her eyes and felt something definitive crystallize inside her. Her son had not only ignored her agony, but now, while she was connected to machines in a hospital bed, he was asking her to solve his financial problems. The same financial problems for which she had sold the house where he had grown up, where he had taken his first steps, where they had celebrated every Christmas until Monica, his daughter-in-law, decided that family celebrations were too vulgar for their new social status. "The papers are in the top left drawer of the desk, Marcus, but I don't have anyone who can go get them. I'm alone in the hospital, like I was alone yesterday when I was dying." "Oh, Mom, don't be dramatic. Look, I'm going to call Mrs. Johnson, your neighbor, so she can open up for me. You give permission, okay? This is super urgent, and I can't lose this opportunity over something so simple. Something so simple." Her heart attack had been something so simple that it had interfered with her son's financial plans. Dorothy hung up the phone without saying goodbye, feeling that every beat of her repaired heart resonated like a hammer, forging something new and terrible in her soul. 20 minutes later, Anthony called. "Mom, Marcus just called me and told me you're in the hospital. Why didn't you tell us anything? We could have helped you." His voice had that tone of reproach he used when he wanted to make her feel guilty about something. "Anthony, the doctor called all of you yesterday. He told you I was dying and that you needed to come immediately." Dorothy spoke with a serenity that surprised her. Really? Oh, Mom, yesterday was total chaos. Engineer Morales' wedding was incredible. I met a ton of people important for my career. Actually, I got 3 new clients who are going to represent like $200,000 in income this year. Do you realize? Your sacrifice was worth it, because if I had gone to the hospital, I wouldn't have made those contacts. Her sacrifice. Anthony had called her heart attack a sacrifice, as if Dorothy had strategically planned to have a heart attack to help her son's professional career. The perversity of that logic was so overwhelming that Dorothy didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Look, Mom, since you're there at the hospital, could you take advantage and ask the doctor about my gastritis problem? I've been really bad with my stomach, and I haven't had time to go to the doctor. Maybe he can give you a prescription or something, right? That way I kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Dorothy hung up without responding. For the second time that day, one of her children had transformed her personal tragedy into an opportunity to solve their own problems. Not one question about her health condition, not one word of relief knowing she had survived, not the slightest intention of visiting her. The phone rang for the 3rd time that afternoon. It was Jasmine, the apple of her eye, the girl she had carried in her arms during entire nights when she had nightmares, whom she had taught to walk, to read, to be a strong and independent woman. Mommy, I just found out from my brothers that you're in the hospital. Why didn't you tell me anything? You have me very worried. Jasmine's voice sounded genuinely alarmed, and for a moment Dorothy felt a flash of hope. Jazzy, my love, yesterday I had a very serious heart attack. I was clinically dead for 6 minutes. The doctor called all 3 of you to come because he thought I wasn't going to survive the operation. Oh, Mommy, how horrible. But you're better now, right? Surely the doctors exaggerated a little. You know how alarmist they are. Look, I'm going to confess something to you. Last night, after the premiere, I had a feeling that something wasn't right with you, but I thought it was stress from the event. Do you realize how the mother-daughter connection works? Dorothy felt something collapse inside her. Her daughter was romanticizing her own negligence, turning it into a mystical story about supernatural connections between mother and daughter. It was as if Jasmine had taken the cruelest abandonment of her life and transformed it into a charming anecdote about feminine intuition. Mommy, I need to ask you a huge favor. Do you remember your engagement ring, the one Daddy gave you? It's just that Ricardo and I are going through a very difficult economic situation after investing so much money in the play. We need to pawn it for a few months, just until the investment recovers. Could you tell me where you keep it? The engagement ring. The only piece of jewelry Dorothy had kept after selling everything else to help her children. The symbol of the only 5 truly happy years of her life, when James was alive and when she believed love was forever. The last tangible vestige of an era when someone had loved her unconditionally. The ring is in my jewelry box, in the secret compartment in the back. But Jazzy, that ring is the only thing I have left of your father. Dorothy felt her voice breaking for the first time in the entire conversation. Oh, Mommy, don't be sentimental. It's just an object. Besides, we're going to recover it in a few months. My daddy would be happy to know that his ring is helping his son-in-law get ahead. It's like he's still taking care of the family from heaven. Don't you think that's romantic? Dorothy hung up the phone with trembling hands. Jasmine had found a way to make the theft of her only sentimental treasure sound like an act of paternal love from beyond the grave. Her children's ability to justify their cruelest acts with twisted logic was something Dorothy had never seen with such clarity. That night, while the nurses changed shifts and the hospital sank into nocturnal quiet, Dorothy Grace Washington began to plan something she had never imagined she would be capable of conceiving. It wasn't revenge that boiled in her mind. It was something deeper and more devastating. It was the most brutal education a mother could give her children. During her 64 years of life, Dorothy had been a woman of almost sickly kindness. She had raised her children with the philosophy that unconditional love was the most powerful force in the universe, that a mother should sacrifice herself without limits for the welfare of her descendants, that forgiveness should be infinite and patience eternal. But that night, connected to machines that monitored a heart that had been literally repaired, Dorothy understood that there was an abysmal difference between unconditional love and tolerance for cruelty. Her children hadn't abandoned her out of conscious malice. They had abandoned her because they had never learned to value what they had. For decades, Dorothy had been an infinite and inexhaustible resource, money when they needed it, care when they were sick, food when they were hungry, forgiveness when they hurt her. They had never experienced the scarcity of her love, never faced the consequences of their actions, never had to wonder what would happen if they lost the woman who had dedicated every second of her adult life to their well-being. Dorothy sat up in the hospital bed, ignoring the pain that pierced her chest like fire daggers, and asked Patricia, the nurse on duty, for paper and pen. She had letters to write, letters that would change the course of 4 lives forever. The first letter was for Marcus, the son who had made money his god, and who had learned to see his mother as a source of financing rather than as a human being. Dorothy wrote with a trembling but determined hand, pouring 45 years of maternal sacrifices into words that cut like glass. Marcus, my son, for 45 years, you have been the reason for every decision I have made. I sold my house so you could have yours. I worked 3 jobs to pay for the private university you wanted. I lived in a miserable apartment so you could live in Buckhead. Yesterday, while you were toasting with Japanese investors, I was clinically dead on an operating table. Today you ask me to solve your banking problems from a hospital bed. You have turned my love into a commercial transaction, and I have been foolish enough to allow it. But commercial transactions have terms and conditions, and mine have just changed forever. The second letter was for Anthony, the son who had learned to justify his selfishness with cheap philosophies about professional success. Dorothy wrote with surgical precision, dissecting 42 years of a mother-son relationship that had become parasitic. Anthony, my child, I taught you that work was sacred, but I never taught you that it was more sacred than your mother's life. Yesterday you preferred to make professional contacts while I fought against death. Today you ask me to use my hospitalization to solve your gastritis problems. You have turned every moment of my pain into an opportunity for your personal benefit. For 42 years, I have been your emotional and financial safety net, but nets have a weight limit, and you have just broken mine. The third letter was for Jasmine, the daughter who had perfected the art of emotional manipulation to the point of being able to make abandonment sound like maternal love. This letter was the hardest to write because Jasmine had been her weakness, her spoiled one, the girl she had loaded with more love and fewer limits. Jasmine, my princess, I gave you so much love that I forgot to teach you to give it. Yesterday you chose your husband's theater premiere over my life. Today you want to take your father's ring from me to solve your financial problems. You have turned my generosity into your acquired right, and my pain into your opportunity. For 38 years, you have been the sun of my universe, but suns that don't give warmth back become black holes that devour everything around them. The fourth letter was the most important, because it was for herself. It was a declaration of independence written by a 64-year-old woman who had finally learned that loving someone didn't mean disappearing for them. Dorothy Grace Washington. For 64 years, you have believed that being a good mother meant being an invisible mother, that loving unconditionally meant accepting any condition, that giving your life for your children meant literally disappearing so they could shine. Today, in this hospital bed, while your repaired heart beats with renewed strength, you declare your independence from a family that sees you as a resource and not as a person. You declare your right to be loved as you love, respected as you respect, valued as you value. From this moment on, Dorothy Grace Washington will be the protagonist of her own life, not a secondary character in others' lives. When she finished writing the letters, Dorothy carefully stored them in the envelope with her personal belongings. Tomorrow, when her children finally appeared at the hospital with their well-rehearsed excuses and their supermarket flowers, she would give them the biggest surprise of their lives. A surprise that would make them understand that a mother's love is not a renewable resource, and that when it runs out, the consequences can be more devastating than any financial or professional loss. But before executing her plan, Dorothy had a very important call to make. A call that would determine if she would have the courage to carry out the most radical decision of her life, or if her maternal love would betray her once more, condemning her to an old age of emotional crumbs and constant humiliations. Dorothy's determination is reaching a point of no return. Her letters are written, her heart is healing, but her soul is preparing something that will change everything forever. If this story is touching your heart, and you want to know how Dorothy will execute her plan, share this video with someone who needs to reflect on the value of family. The comments are open for you to tell us what you think of Dorothy's decision so far. The call Dorothy needed to make was to her sister Hope, who had been living in Savannah for 20 years. Hope had been the only person who had always told her uncomfortable truths about the way she was raising her children. The only voice that for decades had tried to open her eyes about the toxic relationship she had built with Marcus, Anthony, and Jasmine. "Sister, how are you?" Hope's voice immediately sounded alarmed when she heard Dorothy's tone. "Why are you calling me from the hospital? What happened?" "Hope, I had a massive heart attack yesterday. I was clinically dead for 6 minutes. My 3 children chose their social commitments over coming to see me die." Dorothy spoke with a calm that surprised her sister, who expected to hear crying and desperation. "Oh, Dorothy, I'm so sorry. But tell me you're not surprised, because I've been telling you for years that those kids don't value you. You're finally seeing things clearly, aren't you?" "Hope, I need to ask you something very important. Do you remember the house we inherited from our parents in Savannah? The one that's in your name because I never wanted to move from Atlanta?" Dorothy felt her heart accelerating. But this time it wasn't from fear, but from anticipation. "Of course I remember. It's been empty since the last tenant died 6 months ago. It's a big house, has 3 bedrooms, a huge garden, and it's in the historic district. Why are you asking? I want to go live there. I want to disappear from my children's lives and start over in a place where nobody knows who I am or how much I've sacrificed for a family that doesn't deserve me." Dorothy pronounced these words as if it were a declaration of war against her own history. "Dorothy, are you sure about what you're telling me? It's a very radical decision. Your children can change. They can realize their mistakes." "Hope, yesterday I was dead for 6 minutes. In those 6 minutes I saw with absolute clarity everything I've lost trying to win my children's love. I saw the men I rejected because they needed all my attention. I saw the jobs I didn't take because their schedules didn't suit me for taking care of them. I saw the dreams I buried to finance theirs. And when I woke up, the first thing they did was ask me for favors. I can't continue like this. I won't continue like this." The silence on the other end of the line extended for several seconds until Hope sighed deeply. "All right, sister. The house is yours when you need it. But I want you to know that this is going to hurt them more than you imagine. They're going to understand what they lost only when they can no longer recover it. That's exactly the point, Hope. They need to learn the value of things by losing something they never thought they could lose. They need to understand that a mother's love is not an acquired right, but a gift that can be withdrawn when it's abused." Friday morning, exactly 48 hours after her surgery, Dorothy received the visit she had been waiting for. Marcus arrived first, dressed in a $5,000 suit and carrying a bouquet of flowers he had bought at the corner stand outside the hospital. His face showed that expression of barely disguised annoyance he wore when he had to do something he considered a waste of time. "Mom, good thing you're better now. You look very good for having been as serious as the doctors said." Marcus sat in the chair farthest from the bed, as if the illness were contagious. 20 minutes later, Anthony and Jasmine arrived together, also with supermarket flowers and that forced smile people use when they fulfill an unpleasant social obligation. The 3 arranged themselves around the bed like judges in a tribunal, waiting for Dorothy to thank them for having interrupted their lives to visit her. "Look, Mom," Jasmine began with that honeyed voice she used when she wanted to manipulate a situation. "We 3 talked and decided that when you get out of the hospital, we're going to take better care of you. We're going to visit you more often, at least once every 2 weeks. Once every 2 weeks. Her children had calculated that the minimum socially acceptable frequency for visiting a mother who had just suffered a heart attack was once every 14 days. Dorothy felt something harden definitively in her chest. "Yes, Mom," Anthony added. "And we also thought it would be a good idea for you to move to a place closer to us. There are some very nice apartments near my office. They're not expensive and they're well located." "Low-income housing?" Dorothy asked, with a calm her children interpreted as resignation. "Well, not exactly low income, but more accessible than where you live now. The point is for you to be closer for any emergency," Marcus explained, with that condescending tone he used when he thought he was being generous. "And about the medical expenses," Jasmine added, "we also talked about that. We can help you with a part, but obviously we can't cover everything because we also have our own financial responsibilities." A part of her medical expenses, her children, who lived in houses she had helped buy, who had studied at universities she had paid for, who had received every dollar of her savings when they needed it, We're offering to pay part of the medical expenses of the heart that had literally broken from giving so much. Dorothy looked at them for several seconds, memorizing their faces, recording in her mind that mixture of impatience and false concern that characterized them. Then, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she opened the nightstand drawer and took out 3 white envelopes. "I have something for each of you," she said, with a strangely serene voice. "These are letters I wrote last night while you slept peacefully in your homes, knowing your mother had survived a heart attack and without feeling the need to even call to ask how she had spent the night." Marcus took his envelope with that expression of annoyance he wore when he thought Dorothy was being dramatic. Anthony and Jasmine exchanged glances, probably thinking their mother had written thank you letters for their great generosity in visiting her. "Read them out loud," Dorothy requested. "I want to hear how my words sound when they come from your mouths." Marcus opened his envelope first and began reading in a monotone voice as if he were reviewing a financial report. But as he progressed in the reading, his expression changed from annoyance to confusion, from confusion to alarm, and from alarm to absolute panic. "Mom, what is this?" Marcus dropped the letter as if it burned. "Are you telling us we're no longer your children?" Anthony and Jasmine read their letters in silence, and for the first time in decades, Dorothy saw something she had never seen on her children's faces: genuine fear. Not fear of losing money or professional opportunities, but fear of losing something they had always taken for granted, would be there no matter how they treated it. "Mommy, this can't be serious," Jasmine whispered with tears in her eyes. "You can't abandon us." Mothers don't abandon their children. Mothers don't abandon their children? Dorothy sat up in bed with an energy that surprised everyone, including herself. "And children can abandon their mothers when they're dying?" "It's different, Mom," Anthony stammered. "We have responsibilities, jobs, our own families." "And what do I have, Anthony? What do I have besides 3 children who see me as an emotional and financial ATM? When was the last time any of you asked me what I wanted to do with my life? When was the last time you invited me to something because you really wanted my company and not because you needed something from me?" The silence that followed these questions was more eloquent than any answer. The 3 siblings looked at each other, searching for arguments that didn't exist, justifications that would sound convincing, even to themselves. "Mom, we can change," Marcus promised, with a desperation Dorothy had never heard in his voice. "We can be better children. Give me a chance to prove it to you." "A chance?" Dorothy laughed, but there was no humor in her laughter. "Marcus, you had 45 years of chances. Anthony, you had 42. Jasmine, you had 38. Do you know how many chances you gave me to be something more than your personal provider? 0. "Mommy, please," Jasmine begged, taking Dorothy's hand. "I love you. I've always loved you." "Do you love me, Jasmine? Then tell me, what's my favorite color? What's my favorite song? What dreams did I have before I had you? What would I like to do if I had free time?" You can't answer because you've never been interested in knowing me as a person, only as your mother function. The truth of these words fell on the 3 siblings like an avalanche. They realized that in decades of relationship with their mother, they had never had a conversation about her tastes, her dreams, her fears, her aspirations. Dorothy had been a satellite that orbited around their lives, but they had never orbited around hers. "What do you want us to do?" Anthony asked with a broken voice. "Tell us what you want, and we'll do it." "What I want is no longer in your hands to give me," Dorothy responded with a serenity that chilled the blood. "What I want is to recover the 40 years I lost living for you instead of living with myself. What I want is to meet the Dorothy who existed before becoming your mother. What I want is to discover who I am when I'm not the woman who solves your problems." "But we need you," Marcus murmured, and for the first time in his adult life, he looked like a scared child. "And I needed you yesterday when I was dying. The difference is that you chose not to be there. I'm choosing not to be there too, but with 48 hours difference." Dorothy got up from the bed, for the first time since the surgery. Ignoring the protests of the cables and tubes, she went to the closet where her clothes were and began getting dressed while her children watched her with absolute terror. "What are you doing?" Jasmine asked. "I'm leaving. I'm discharging myself, and I'm going to start the life I should have started 40 years ago." "You can't leave without the doctors discharging you," Marcus protested. "Can't I?" Dorothy turned toward him with a smile they had never seen before. "Marcus, for 45 years, you've decided for me when I could spend my money, where I could live, how I should dress, who I could relate to. Anthony, for 42 years you've decided when I deserved your attention and when I didn't. Jasmine, for 38 years you've decided what parts of my life were important and which ones you could ignore. None of you will ever decide anything about me again. Dorothy finished getting dressed and took her purse, where she had stored the few personal objects she had in the hospital. Then she headed toward the door, but stopped and turned toward her children one last time. You're going to try to find me. You're going to call the police. You're going to hire private investigators. You're going to move heaven and earth to find me. But I'm going to be in a place where you'll never think to look. I'm going to be being happy without you. And when you finally accept that you lost me forever, I want you to remember this. You had the best mother in the world for decades, and you traded her for social commitments and business opportunities. Dorothy left the hospital walking with firm steps, leaving behind 3 adults who for the first time in their lives understood what real loss meant. Not the loss of money or opportunities, but the loss of something they had believed eternal and indestructible, their mother's unconditional love. In the taxi that took her to the bus station, Dorothy dialed Hope's number. Sister, I already left the hospital. I'm on my way to Savannah. After 64 years, I'm finally going to meet Dorothy Grace Washington. 6 months later, Dorothy lived in a house full of light in Savannah's historic district, surrounded by new friends who knew her as Grace, a widowed woman who had decided to start over in a magical city. She had learned to paint watercolors, had discovered she loved tending to her garden of magnolias and azaleas, had made friends who valued her company for who she was, not for what she could give them. On Sundays, when the church bells of the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist rang and families gathered in Forsyth Park, Dorothy didn't feel nostalgia for the children she had lost. She felt gratitude for the woman she had found, a woman who had finally learned that loving others didn't mean disappearing for them, and that sometimes the most radical act of self-love is walking away from those who love you only when they need you. Marcus, Anthony, and Jasmine never found her, although they tried for years. They learned to live with the void they had created by taking for granted the purest love they would ever receive. And Dorothy, the woman who had been reborn at 64, learned that it's never too late to choose yourself. Every morning, as she tended her garden overlooking the Savannah River, Dorothy would whisper a prayer of gratitude, not for the children who had broken her heart, but for the heart that had been strong enough to heal and love again. She had learned that true strength wasn't in enduring abuse in the name of love, but in having the courage to walk away when love became a one-way street. She joined the Savannah Community Theater, where her natural grace and wisdom made her a beloved mentor to young actors. She volunteered at the local food bank, finally able to give from abundance rather than scarcity. She even began dating again, something she thought impossible at her age, when she met William, a retired teacher whose wife had passed 5 years earlier, and who treated Dorothy with the respect and admiration she had forgotten she deserved. This story teaches us that true love requires reciprocity, respect, and mutual appreciation. That being a mother doesn't mean being invisible, and that sometimes the most powerful lesson we can give is showing the consequences of not valuing what we have until it's lost forever. Dorothy Grace Washington's journey from doormat to self-advocate reminds us that it's never too late to reclaim our worth, to demand the love we deserve, and to choose our own happiness over the comfort of others. Her children learned too late that unconditional love doesn't mean love without consequences, and that the heart of a mother, while vast and forgiving, is not infinite when faced with endless cruelty. If this story has touched your heart and made you reflect on your own family relationships, don't forget to give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell us in the comments, do you think Dorothy made the right decision? Your opinion is very important to us. Subscribe to our channel because we have many more stories that will make you reflect on life, love, and the decisions that define our destiny. Remember, it's never too late to choose yourself, and self-love is the most valuable gift you can give yourself. In the words that Dorothy would often repeat to her new friends in Savannah, you teach people how to treat you, and sometimes the greatest teaching comes from walking away.